Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Right Talk Wednesday podcast. I've been doing a series with the scribes of the Cozy Vales Project, which is a cozy fantasy project, and I encourage you to check out all of the interviews in this series. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Phillip Sanderson, who is not only an author within the Cozy Vales world, but he also writes his own stuff, and he's a math teacher. So we're going to talk about the book he's writing on math as well. So thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is a pleasure.
Great. Well, we've talked, quite a bit before the show. Why don't we just start by having you tell our listeners and viewers just a little bit about yourself?
I live in Virginia, the swampy part of Virginia, southeastern. I've been a math teacher for 34. This might be my 35th year. I got into writing around 2022, and I say got into it. I should say started taking it more seriously in 2022. I was prompted by one of my daughters called me up and said, "Hey, Dad, I've got this idea for a story that I think is really cool. So here's the idea, and you're welcome. Goodbye." And I sat down and I wrote this story. It's called Windows to the Soul. It needs to go through a series of revisions now that I've been writing for a few years. But I did that, and my brother read it and said, "Look, if you're serious about this writing thing, even though you're a math teacher, you want to keep writing. I've got this friend who I went to college with that maybe who could help you on this on your way." And actually, that's how I met Scott Walker, who leads the Cozy Vales project. It was through my brother because they went to college together in Virginia. And we got on Zoom together, and Scott and I hit it off. And Scott kind of said, "If you're going to be serious, you need to do a couple things. Um, Develop a newsletter. You need to have a website. You need your own domain name, certain things like that." And he left me alone enough to figure out a lot on my own. So it wasn't handing me a whole kit and caboodle. It was, here are the things you should try to do. Now go figure it out some. And I did. It was a huge learning curve, huge experience. But I remember that Scott said, by the time I had done 6, 8 months worth of work, he said, "You're years ahead of where I was at this point." So I've been writing for several years seriously, though I can't say that I ever stopped writing since I was 8 years old. Um, Everything is a creative process for me, whether it's being a math teacher or writing or playing music, everything is a creative outlet. Um, and I realized a couple of years ago that if I don't have some sort of outlet like that, I kind of go stir crazy and drive myself and my head nuts. So everything is a creative outlet of one sort or another.
That sounds wonderful. I also have to take a moment and do a shameless self-promotional plug. If you are an author who needs a website, a newsletter, a domain name, please reach out to Epona Author Solutions. I have been doing this for more years than I care to admit. I am passionate about it. And I love to work technology for people who are not technology inclined. So, and shameless plug.
I'm a slightly technology inclined, and it was still a steep learning curve. It is not an easy thing to get into. In fact, my website still has an error that I can't get rid of. You and I may talk later about it.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I I was just talking to one of the customers at my day job today, and she brought up a really fascinating question, and I'm like, that's the stuff I love. Bring me those weird error messages, because sometimes, you can Google something or figure it out, and yeah, so yeah, would love to do that. But I will not digress. We will stay on track. We will talk about your writing. So yeah, and Scott is so easy to talk to. And I mean, his interview kicked off our series here,
Mhm.
and yeah, just all around, wonderful, wonderful person. So
He-
let's,
He's he's been a supportive resource, no doubt. I would not be as far along in my writing journey as I am if not for his um, little boost up.
I love that, because I'm a firm believer in a rising tide lifts all boats. This business is too difficult for everybody to be an island.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's start by talking about Cozy Vales. I'm a new scribe to the project. I regret I still have the anthologies on my e-reader. Grad school has kept me from opening them up, but I hope to this summer. So let's talk about your veil and your work in Cozy Veils.
So I developed a veil called Clover Veil, and Clover Veil is kind of we all want our veils to be different and unique. One scribe has a floating veil, and one scribe has a desert veil, and I know you've got one primary with a lot of horses, I believe.
Hmm.
So I thought to myself, what if I can make a sanctuary veil? And that's kind of how I envisioned it to begin with. A place where that attracts people who maybe need to be healed or people who are healers or just I wanted this idea, and it took me a really long time to figure out how to put this on paper in a way that the other scribes were comfortable with. How do you attract somebody? You've got somebody, we need a certain person who does such and such in the veil, but not take them away from something that they're already happy with. I didn't want my veil to be pulling people away from happy lives that they were already living, but yet I wanted it to have this. So it's a low sentient veil with a mystery behind why is it low sentient? How does that happen? And I've worked that out already, and hopefully over the course of some stories or novellas, this will be revealed. Why is it semi-sentient? But it's got this idea that it attracts the people that it needs into the veil in one way or another, or the people that can be helped by people already there. And that was really important to me. And all the scribes helped me work through how that was going to happen. By the same token, I wanted people who were malicious to feel very uncomfortable. And so if you're there for not good purposes or you just don't fit, the veil will make you uneasy. Like you don't want to stay. You're not drawn to be here. In fact, you're pushed away to leave. And maybe so far, if you dig in your heels, that the veil may actually maybe drop a twig or two on you here and there, or you're going to stumble over a root or a brick in the sidewalk or something. The veil will gently let you know that if you're not contributing productive, if you're not making the place happier, maybe it's time to move on. And so that was my idea with Clovervale, and that really permeates all of my stories. What I've realized with my third story is that leads me to the idea of found families. Um, it naturally, if I've written another story with kind of a found family, it's because that's how I've designed my veil. And it's a theme that I'm really enjoying. I'd like to move away from that a little bit because I don't want to keep repeating. But yeah, Clovervale allows people to be found and find their place and what they're good at and how they can fit.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I love found family stories. They're one of my favorites. So, and as you were describing your veil, I'm reminded one of my favorite authors is Mercedes Lackey and her Valdemar stories. And she recently explained this in the Founding trilogy that finished up last year. But the in her world, she has these air spirits, these Verandi, that keep an eye on the borders of Valdemar.
Mhm.
And since and they keep certain elements out of Valdemar until Valdemar is ready to deal with it. And I love that idea. I love the idea of a low sentient veil. That just sounds amazing. I'm like, oh, I got to read those anthologies now.
Yeah, I was really excited when that all came together, and we started working on the veil and what the veil did and just how the veil itself interacted, not just the people, but the veil itself interacted um, with who's there, helping them find their place.
I just love the creativity in this project. I mean, I'm just very slowly getting to know the veils, getting to know everybody, and the creativity is just off the charts amazing.
I think that one of my struggles with writing in general, writing fantasy, writing anything at this point, is giving myself permission to let my brain go wide open creative, to take off whatever walls that I've naturally put up. I don't want to say as a math teacher, just as a person who I know I can be more creative and I need to do that. But I think that sometimes I put my own brakes on and I don't know why. And as a new writer, relatively new, I know that you've been writing for much, much longer than I have, and almost everybody in our project. I'm certain everybody in our project has been writing longer than I have. So as a new writer, I'm adopting this idea of an emergent writer, giving myself permission to go very laterally is one of my struggles right now. Is to just go wild. Go let your imagination go wild. For some reason, I just that's where I need to think about. So sometimes it's my drive into
Mhm.
work.
Oh, yes.
I've
I
got a
know.
half-hour drive to the school where I teach and a half hour back, and I let my mind just kind of go wild, and so yeah, I hope that my veil is creative and different and interesting and intriguing enough, but making sure that I'm not locking myself in has been one of my challenges.
Yeah, I remember those commutes. Those commutes are gold for creative ideas. Even now, I've got about half an hour into town. And yeah, that half an hour into town is just amazing. It's like all of a sudden I figured things out.
I can write an entire story on the way there. And one of the things that makes me happy, makes me think, okay, maybe I'm doing the right thing with my life is that 8 hours later, I can go home and remember every detail that I thought of and just sit down and type and just let it all flow. That story was from beginning to end was constructed. Let's go. It hasn't left me. It's still there 9 hours later. Sometimes I think of it at 7 a.m. and it's not till 9 p.m. maybe when I have a chance to sit down on my laptop and write some. So that feels very cool when that happens. I enjoy
Very
it.
cool. Yeah, yeah. Well, I will say, um, definitely give yourself permission for the creativity. Give yourself permission for, thinking laterally. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn, and I finally learned it within the last year, is write what you're passionate about, write what you love, and damn the rest of it.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I'm especially happy with the story that should be coming out in September in the autumn anthology, where I've got a guy who finds himself in a vale and he's suffering from amnesia. He doesn't know where he comes from, doesn't even know his own name, and doesn't know why he's there. But the mayor of Clovervale, she knows that people are only in Clovervale for a reason. If Clovervale draws you in, you've got a purpose. And so the story's about finding his purpose.
Oh,
And it's got some adorable characters. I've got two little tinker gnomes that come across him. And yeah, they were a lot of fun to write. They were a lot of fun to write. So enjoy that.
I love that. I'll have to look for that one because yeah, I love that.
So lot of fun to write. A lot of fun to write.
Yeah.
This third story actually came to me, wrote itself faster than maybe the other two, which is probably a good sign for me.
Those are the gems. Those are
I
the
like it.
ones.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about math. First of
Okay.
all, because I know, a lot of people are like myself and do the Home Alone face. God, I just dated myself. But anyway, do the, math. Um, but I also like what you had said, if I could bring it up when we were talking before about math and everything being creative.
Mhm.
And I feel like if somebody had explained it to me as a creative endeavor, I would have got into it more. As it was, I literally told my Algebra 2 teacher in high school, I was like, I'm going to write romance novels and clean horse stalls for a living. I do not need algebra. So I got my required 5 credits of math and skedaddled.
I understand. By the way, that seems to have come true for you.
It kind of did.
It's impressive.
I'm like, oh my God. Yeah.
So
Uh,
cool.
yeah. But it also made it extremely difficult when I went back to college and I had to take a
I know.
placement test and
Yeah.
I ended up, it was again, basic math. I stopped at like, basic college algebra, but without somebody like you, without my spouse, kind of explaining it to me in a creative way, I had no idea about it. So let's talk a little bit because you had
Sure.
mentioned you were working on a nonfiction book.
Hmm.
I'm assuming it's nonfiction.
Absolutely nonfiction.
Yep. For math teachers.
Yeah, I'm kind of calling it a handbook for math teachers, um, tentatively kind of called Beyond Buzzwords. So again, I need to give a little bit of background. My father has a doctorate in civil engineering, and my mother had a degree in English. So growing up, I felt like I had a math and science side on one parent and an English side on another parent. And my mother was always reading to us, encouraging us to read. And we had just books all over the place. And it took me a number of years to realize that my dad, for all his engineering and science and math, was also a very creative writer. In fact, he did a NaNoWriMo a number of years ago and produced a little book called The Curse of Philatos, which was fun for him to write. And I sometimes think he wrote it for his grandchildren, really, and just to see that he could. Um, so 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 yeah, I've got my dad, the math science guy, my mom, the English lady, and that kind of combined into me. Uh, And even all through my math teaching, it like I said, it's been a creative process. How can I write this lesson better? How can I make that better? How can I revise? What words to use? And really early on in my teaching, this is long before I started writing kind of as seriously as I am now. I had this idea that for any student that was ready for a math concept, there were the right words. There's always the right words that can unlock it. Now, some students just aren't ready for it, and I get that. But if you've got the background and you're at the point where this concept could be attained, a math teacher that uses the right words just unlocks it.
Mm-hmm.
By the same token, the math teacher that uses the wrong words is just going to muddy everything and make it confusing. So I'm a big believer in words. And again, this doesn't come so much from the writing perspective as it comes from just trying to communicate effectively a topic that many people find difficult. I just want to communicate effectively math concepts in a way that students won't get them jumbled and mixed up. Recently, math was described by a non-math person as you've got a bowl of goldfish and all the goldfish is swimming around and you don't know which goldfish is which and you can't keep them separate. And now they're just going to be muddy in my head.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Mm-hmm.
but I love words. I loved words before I ever thought I would develop a newsletter or write stories or be in an anthology. 30 some years ago when I was teaching, I'm like, oh, wait, those words confused the students and these words made them clear. And so one of the things that I've been encouraged to do, I've got a coworker who had to kind of audit my class for a while when she first started teaching with us. And she sat in and she said, you need to write a book about how math teachers should talk to their students. And that's really why it's called the Handbook for the Novice Math Teacher, Beyond Buzzwords. I don't want to use clicky, cutesy words when we have words out there that mean the things that we're trying to say and are much clearer and precise. Precision is important when we're communicating mathematics. So this book, while it's a handbook for new math teachers, is also going to be a lot of language. It's about let's stop trying to dummy everything down into imprecise words that doesn't communicate effectively. And I think that that really dovetails with my idea of communicating in my stories as well. You know, that this whole idea of communication, it, it's no different in math than it is in fantasy or fiction. You're simply trying to find the right words so that it unlocks the ideas in your reader or your listener's heads and communicate effectively. And that's really what my book should be about. It's not going to be a textbook. It's not going to go through chapters of math. But what I have done is I've captured students' mistakes over the past 4 or 5 years. I've photocopied papers. I've got a binder of them where I can say, look, these are the things we're saying, and these are the mistakes that they lead to. Here's how we can fix some of this. Let's be precise. Let's be accurate. And let's not be the problem for our math students. Let's be the solution. Um, so that's what my book is going to be about. And it has begun. It started. I've got some chapters outlined, and I'm excited to write it. So at some point, I'll need to retire to write all the things that I've got on my list that I want to retire. Need to retire from math teaching, but we're still paying the bills. So until I can become independently wealthy with my writing, I'm still going to teach some math right now.
Well, I'm excited for you. I mean, the way that you explain that reminds me very much. And so my spouse very much is a science background, but he's also a writer. That's how we met. And it reminded me very much of how he was explaining some of these concepts to me, where I was like, oh, now that makes perfect sense the way you just said it. So I'm excited for you. You
It's
know,
words. It's
it's,
about words.
yeah, it's about
Yeah.
words.
Whether
Don't
you're
be,
math, science, English, literature, it's about the words we're using.
yeah, don't be scared of math. Just find somebody who knows the right words to explain it to you.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
It- yep.
that's
I
amazing.
firmly believe that. And my other thing, one of the greatest compliments I ever got from one of my students was she had an older sister who I had taught a couple of years before. And I said, "What did your sister tell you to expect of me?" And she was on the way out the door and she said, "You were very passionate about your math." And then she just walked out the door and left. And I was left alone in my classroom thinking, there's a lot worse descriptions than being told you're passionate about what you do. And so I've kind of embraced that. I'm good with that.
Oh, and in my experience, those are the best teachers because if you're passionate about it, you care whether the material gets relayed to the students. And I'm starting to get into pedagogy and all of
Mhm.
that. And I won't bore the listeners and viewers and, getting into the weeds of pedagogy. But yeah, I can't think of, that a better compliment than you're
Yeah.
passionate about math.
One of my favorite quotes was by Emerson, and nothing great is ever accomplished without enthusiasm. So find what you're enthusiastic about and go for it.
Yeah. And that's great advice for writing. Find what you're enthusiastic about, find what you love. And not only will that help you, but I can guarantee you that there are other people out there who are enthusiastic about the same things you are.
Hmm. And it'll come across on the page.
Mm-hmm.
It'll come across. Let it come across on the page. Give yourself permission to geek out on what makes you happy.
Very much so. I was in the beginning of the paranormal romance genre. And it was very plain to me, even though I hadn't yet published, you could tell which authors were in it because they were like, oh, I can geek out over all this, the vampires, the werewolves and stuff. And then you can tell, oh, okay, this is the author that's doing it because their agent said, you better write a paranormal romance book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is good for you.
Yeah. Well, that is wonderful. I do want to touch on one more endeavor, and I've got to be a little bit cagey because we're not quite ready to talk about it, but we're cooking up something in the Cozy Vales,
Hmm.
and you will be a part of it, and it involves just your particular part involves music. And I feel like just from our talking, the thinking about creativity, creative endeavors, music fits right in there with that.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, so I've been a part of three bands. Most recent band was called Blind Squirrel. Sadly, a little over a year ago, they broke up. But it was a trio of guitarists. We got together, and our idea at first was just to sit around in the living room and play guitar together. And eventually, we started recording. And I took over the job of learning the software for recording because I didn't want to get kicked out of the band. I realized, look, I can't sing. For as much as I use my voice to teach I announce parade, I DJ some, I use my voice constantly. I can't sing for anything. I've been asked to not sing, as a matter of fact, whenever I try to sing. So I'm like, how do I keep myself from getting, we've got three guitarists. We don't need three guitarists, and I can't sing. It's time for me to learn something new. So I learned the software engineering, but I also learned I don't have a great ear all the time. So the guys in the background, James and Dave, would go, you know what, we need that level to come up or that to come down, or could you add a little bit of reverb on that, or can you do this? And I'm at the computer and I'm doing that. Now, I play the guitar also, but the other thing, I would be handed a melody and some chords, and sometimes James would say to me, can you write some words to this? And so the other role that I fit into was sometimes doing lyrics. Not all the time, because the other guys were good at lyrics too. But every now and then they'd come to me and say, hey, I've got these two lines that won't work. You're the word guy. Find something that works here. And so I played guitar. I ended up playing banjo, played some harmonica. I did those sorts of things. I was the guy at the keyboard, but I also worked the lyrics. So there are a couple songs that I wrote mostly by myself, other songs I contributed to, but I just love being in the band. Very sad not to be working with both of those guys because they're great guys, great support system. We really felt like a brotherhood, but love playing my acoustic guitar. Love my acoustic guitar. It was a lot of fun. And you're alluding to, um, it turns out that the little piece of music at the beginning and end of a podcast, news to me was called a stinger. And I volunteered to compose and play the music for the stinger. Have I said too much? I might have.
I don't think you've said too much.
Might have, hope not. Okay. Anyway, so a little bit of music there is mine. I wrote it like I did 4 or 5 different versions before people said, that's the one, let's go with that. So just recording up here in my little office room upstairs here with a nice microphone. It was enjoyable. It was enjoyable to try to write. It was challenging to try to write 11 seconds or less of a little piece of music that could be used as an intro and outro. But it was one of those things where I envisioned, hey, I want to play in capo 3. I want it to be in the key of D, and I think no, key of G, and I think this is how it should sound. And it was one of those drives into work, and I came home and it played. I don't write music very often. I'm not good at it, but this piece of music I envisioned in my head, and it came out of the guitar, and I was pretty pleased with it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I've got to ask one more question, and
Sure.
that is, will you be writing songs for your Vale and Cozy Vales?
I haven't. And again, because I'm not a great songwriter, I don't hear melodies. My friend
Hmm.
James, amazing. He would play chords and then all of a sudden melodies would come to him and he'd hum and make nonsense words. And that's when I would take his nonsense and make lyrics on them. I don't hear melodies. When I play chords, I just hear notes. So I definitely have some shortcomings as a band member. But I learned how to make myself stay, which was cool. So I don't know that I'll be writing anything. If James and I get together, James is still around, and we need to get together and play music again. There's a chance that we could write some Cozy Vales music. So some Clovervale music would be very cool to write. I think that that's something a little folksy, something a little, dare I say, hobbitish.
I love
So,
it. I love it.
yep,
Well, wonderful. Well, again, just like all my guests, I feel like we could talk for hours. But alas, we both have lives and I'm sure
we do.
we do. So thank you so much for being here. I've super appreciated it. Just as a reminder, um, links and everything are going to be in the show notes. Click early, click often, like, subscribe, follow. But would you mind just telling everybody where to find out more about you and your work?
Absolutely. So I have a newsletter. I have a website at plsanderson.com. Go to plsanderson.com, and if interested, you can sign up for my newsletter. There's a little onboarding sequence, and then it was once a month, now it's more like once every other month. I'll send either a story or an update for what I'm working on. But you can find me there, find out a little bit about me and the projects I'm working on and the things that I've written.
Sounds great. I encourage everybody to go sign up.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much for being here on Right Talk Wednesday. I've really appreciated it.
Yeah,
So
thank you
thank
for
you.
having me. This has been a great experience. I've enjoyed it very much. And like you said, we could keep going. And sadly, time is limited, but this has been really enjoyable.
Well, thank you.